Thank you so much for doing this, sir.
My pleasure.
Could you please quickly introduce yourself?
I'm Dr. Rajshankar Ghosh. I'm a physician. I work in public health. For the past 30 years, I have been involved in primary health care, primarily focusing on immunization and infectious diseases.
So, it's great to have somebody from a public health background, somebody who's been working in this field for 30 years. Now, when we talk about public health, everything is so organized because we have, agencies, government, and structures on how public health work looks like. But when you must have started this, the field of public health in India wouldn't have been so structured, right?
Absolutely. Public health in our time was very uh, theoretical kind of activity. I joined public health in 91. Uh, the world had already eradicated smallpox by then. That was considered to be one of the greatest achievements of public health. So there was a general interest in
Right.
understanding of public health, but the kind of opportunities that academicians and medical professionals and paramedical professionals had in public health was very limited. I will say that the incentives to work in public health was less, much lesser than what we have today.
Right. Interesting, you should mention smallpox because at the center of the eradication of smallpox, and to an extent polio, to however extent we have been able to eradicate polio from most of the countries, it was a vaccine.
Absolutely.
And vaccines are back in the conversation now, but the situation is a little different given that smallpox and polio both are diseases or were diseases that had existed since time immemorial, right? So a vaccine came and eradicated. But right now, a disease which did not exist before has suddenly come to the picture. And now we are talking about vaccines again.
Right.
And I think sometimes it becomes difficult to have that conversation with people, especially who will be end beneficiaries of a vaccine, of why this process takes time, what is the science behind it,
Absolutely.
and why it is critical to develop.
Indeed. But let me, first of all, lay some of the facts straight. So it is not only vaccines that help in eradication. There are multiple other, factors that come into play. One important factor is around disease surveillance, which today we are calling about tracking cases. So disease surveillance, along with a tool like vaccine diagnostics, and in some cases, I will say the kind of social mobilization that we require through people's participation, those all go into helping in eradication. There are three kinds of diseases. One, as you rightly said, the diseases which have been recorded since history.
Right.
Then there are diseases which emerge, and these diseases then become a part of the global public health system. For example, HIV/AIDS.
Right.
The third example are diseases which have not yet emerged, but they are very focalized problems and local problems. For an example, I would give the example of Japanese encephalitis. Japanese encephalitis is a disease which is found only in some parts of the world. Therefore, the resources and the attention these different types of diseases get is very different. So smallpox had a kind of, or polio had a kind of attention which is very different from what COVID is getting.
Right.
And what we are getting for COVID is very different from a disease like Japanese encephalitis. In case of, diseases which are emerging, these diseases come without much notice. One can predict if one closely follows the virology, the mutation, has a very strong surveillance system, none of which, we do have, unfortunately, at this point of time. Therefore, it comes as a shock. But if we really had those tools, we could have predicted many of the diseases. Now, when these diseases come, they have to be tackled, and they have to be tackled in emergency manner in order to, curb the deaths and the disabilities that these diseases cause. Therefore, some very innovative methods have to be put in place. The vaccine development that has happened globally
Right.
within the last 12 months has been one of the very innovative processes. Now, was it a very sudden thing? No. world had been preparing for it. You are probably aware that mRNA vaccines had been tried before.
Right.
They did not succeed. But in this case, we did succeed. So I'll say that we were prepared in some way, but we were not prepared for the amount of devastation that this disease would cause.
Right. So when you say that the world was prepared, by that do you mean the public health community in general had an idea that a pandemic? We saw like documentaries that came out, right? So was that part of the conversation already?
So you see, over the last 5-6 years, if you see, there have been many diseases like the SARS,
Right.
the MERS, the outbreak of the Zika virus,
Right.
the Ebola virus. All of these have actually been warnings that there are newer strains of viruses that are coming and that are affecting the population very disproportionately. So I'll say that, probably we were not really ready for COVID vaccine, COVID kind of virus attack.
Right.
But we were prepared that, there are these kinds of newer viruses that are emerging. And that is what the preparedness was.
Because it's interesting, given that the turnaround time for a vaccine to come up, and not just one, actually several candidates to
Yes.
come up, has been quite remarkable. We have not seen that a vaccine has been developed within a year of a disease outbreak, right? So do you think this preparation was something that added to that fast development?
So I will say that we were not prepared with a vaccine per se.
Right, of course.
What was happening is that we were prepared that if a disease comes, how will we respond?
Right.
Therefore, there were various kinds of bodies that were coming up globally, CEPI and others, which were trying to address these problems. Then suddenly, at the dawn of the 2020, we had this news about this virus. Now, there are various processes in the regulatory, development of a vaccine that had to be then re-looked at in order for a vaccine to be available at the shortest possible time.
Right.
See, a vaccine needs to be three things. One, it needs to be safe. That had, one could never compromise with that. In terms of efficacy, a vaccine needs to be efficacious, but with a very high coverage, vaccine's efficacy becomes effectiveness. So effectiveness is what matters. And the third thing was important was the affordability, that it needs to be at a price in which the kind of people or countries can afford. The fourth thing was that it needed to be compatible with the systems.
Right.
For example, if you see the mRNA vaccines, those are only being used by a few countries at this point of time because they are not compatible with the low and middle income countries' health systems. Affordability is also an issue. Therefore, various other measures than, regulatory development. For example, what we saw in the COVAX mechanism, where countries actually came together, they pulled in fund, they gave some advanced market commitments.
Right.
And through all of these, we made possible that vaccines are available to all countries.
So for the layperson who's just looking at this, reading about vaccine development in the news without having an insight into
Yes.
how the sector works, what would you want to tell them, that what goes into the background of multi-channel negotiations or talks or cooperation?
I will say that, there are three things that, a layman needs to keep in mind. One, that there are scientific processes that have not been compromised with, because the regulatory bodies globally, including the World Health Organization and others, who have really developed the fast track process, have looked into the regulatory processes very clearly. The most important thing, as I said, was to have a safe vaccine. One can never compromise with safety. In case of efficacy, a benchmark was set at 50%, that it needs to be at least 50%. The target vaccine needs to be 70%, preferred. And then the third thing that was there was that every country has its own regulatory agencies. But then there are the regulatory agencies which are very advanced. For example, in America, we have the regulatory agency. We have the European regulatory agencies. In India, the Drug Controller General of India is a very well, established and very, I will say that capable regulatory agency. So therefore, I think if these agencies have really looked into the vaccine and given an approval for use, the people should feel confident to use it.
Right. So you are hopeful of the vaccine rollout, and that
Yeah.
in the coming few months,
Yes.
the rollout will be successful. We have
Yes.
one of the largest FLWs
Correct.
in the world, so I think that should be really
Yes.
helpful. The number of ashas and Anganwadi
Yes.
workers, ANMs we have, so that the vaccine can actually reach the last mile
Absolutely.
village.
They will play a part in terms of ensuring that the vaccine reaches, but the biggest role will be played by the population. In the polio program, also, we saw
Right.
that unless the parents came forward and participated in the
Right.
program, we could not really make the program successful. So, my appeal would be that the parents have to really come forward and make this successful,
Right.
along with the health workers.
Right. And children as well, because
Oh, yeah,
the
obviously.
old age populations
Sure.
will be prioritized after the
Yes.
FLWs and health
Absolutely.
workers. So I remember when we were talking earlier, you had mentioned that technology and access is something that is you would want to talk about, and it
Yes.
is quite important in this current scenario also, because it is technology which has led to the development of vaccines. It is technology that is
Yes.
taking information to everybody, because everybody is now on smartphones as well. So they will be consuming public health and vaccine specific information.
Yes.
So when you say technology and access need to combine to actually deliver a public health target, how would you explain that to a layperson?
So basically, one of the things that we all understand, that technology has to be developed in a way that it will serve mankind.
Right.
So there, I'll give you one example. One of the struggles that we had during our early polio days was that when vaccines came, we did not know whether the vaccine was good enough for use,
Right.
because it had traveled a long distance. We did not know about the cold chain. And therefore, one technology was invented, and this technology was called the vaccine vial monitor. So on every vaccine, there would be a circle and a square. And by the color of the circle and the square, the comparative color between the circle and the square, one would understand whether the vaccine has been through a proper cold chain as it needs to be,
Right.
and is usable or not. So this technology was very easily understood not only by the health workers but also by the common people. So they came and saw the vaccine, they saw the color of that vaccine vial monitor,
Right.
and they understood that the vaccine that is being given is a potent vaccine, other than looking at the expiry date and others. So now, we also have developed another technology, which is called the CoWIN technology.
Okay.
So the CoWIN technology is a technology which does, it's a one-stop technology for multiple functions,
Right.
starting from registration of the population to the point of tracking the population. The third, around validation of the population that they are eligible for the vaccine.
Right.
The fourth is that they would record any safety event that happens after taking the vaccination. And finally, generating the certificate.
Right.
So all of these are being taken care of by the CoWIN app. Now, what happens for a common person? The common person downloads the app. Through that app, the person gets the entire, process, from informing about when to come, where to come,
Right.
through the process of, any safety issue that has happened with the person is recorded on that app. And finally, the person gets a digital certificate, which can be used worldwide.
Interesting. When we look at the target populations, especially because not everybody in India will have
Yeah.
access to smartphones or internet, so for example, I was looking at the routine immunization data, and we see there is some vaccine hesitancy events spread across the country. So do you think there could be some vaccine hesitancy that this vaccine also faces?
Oh, yeah, huge. So this vaccine does face vaccine hesitancy because of three reasons. One is that, there is an issue about the awareness, the right
Right.
information being received by the people. So that the ministry and the various partners working are trying to give the right kind of message to the people. The second is that there are very stray newses that come up in the media. For example, there are stories from Norway
Right.
about a large number of deaths that have happened in the elderly population. There are stories about the allergic reactions. Now, all of these the people read and they become afraid. And the third is that in India, a unique scenario is that people have read about one of the vaccines being, had regulatory approval without the efficacy data. So therefore, people have been hesitant. But as we have been saying again and again, that in terms of the safety issues, the Drug Controller General of India and a group of experts have really looked deep into the safety of the vaccine. The vaccines are safe as any other vaccine is. The second is in terms of efficacy. These vaccines, they need to have a very high coverage in order to become effective. Because efficacy at the end of the day does not matter. What matters is effectiveness. For example, we have vaccines currently in the immunization system which are between 50 to 60% efficacious, but they have a huge impact because they have a very high coverage. So therefore, we need to understand that efficacy is an important issue, but most important is effectiveness. Effectiveness will only be possible with a high coverage and high equity. So the resistance or the hesitancy that will always be there, it is the job of the government and the partners to give the right information to address the concerns that the population has, and therefore mitigate some of the challenges.
What do you think, given your experience in with vaccines in general and in previous programs, for example, taking cue from the polio campaign that ran into mission mode for about 2 decades,
Yes.
do you think there were some lessons we could learn in terms of vaccine information?
Oh, yes. There are, I will say, 3 lessons that we have got from the polio program. One, that the polio program, really focused on community mobilization. That is, we must have the trust of the community in order to really achieve a very high coverage. The second is that we need to really focus on planning, what we call as micro planning. Without planning, nothing moves really forward. And the third thing that is that there needs to be a very transparent communication in terms of, as we had done in polio eradication, that all the data that is there in terms of the coverage, in terms of the number of cases, were published regularly at the ministry website, and the common people could see and get it from them. Other than that, I think, the importance of surveillance has been one of the critical issues. For example, I would say that at one point, we really did not bother about what is the coverage with polio vaccination, because we knew that if there is no case with a strong surveillance, then we are good. But if with a very high coverage, we still have cases, that means that there is a problem.
Right. And when I talk to people who don't come from a public health background, a phenomenon I've noticed is that a lot of people and Indians, they don't really have a trust on the whole system, that not the government system, but the way
Overall.
the country works in general, or the way health information works. And they often doubt whether, the vaccine would be rolled out successfully, whether it'll reach everybody, or, so I always face this question of how well the public health system in India works. Obviously, it has its, gaps, but it is actually one of the remarkable features of the country, that whenever we roll out a program, vaccine or other maternal child health programs also, it actually does reach the last mile target audience.
Yes.
So even in this, in the polio outreach, as you just mentioned, that community mobilization would be the most important.
Very important.
And I think our FLWs, frontline health workers, they would be doing the most amazing job at taking this to every village.
They and also some of the community leaders, like religious leaders, have a big role to play.
Right.
The panchayat leaders have a big role to play. And then, at every mohalla and locality, we do have some very significant people. For example, in Meerut, district of Uttar Pradesh, they engaged with the barbers.
Right.
So when the barber was kind of, shaving, he also talked about the importance of vaccination and everything to the person.
Wow.
So there are multiple channels. You need to find out which are the right channels to reach out. Yeah, I think you spoke about the community radio. So community radio is a very, very important issue that needs to be understood. So there are, one of the important things is that immunization really needs to become a program of the people, by the people, for the people. Because without that, it is impossible to push vaccines. Vaccines can never be pushed. It can be pushed up to a certain level, but then there needs to be a pull. from the
Right,
community, which
from the
is the
people.
demand, which is the
There
demand.
needs to be a demand.
Absolutely.
Right. And to create this demand, there needs to be a regular engagement with people,
Absolutely.
right? And specifically people like the barbers that you mentioned, who are actually community influencers. They talk to the
Yes.
community, they can give you feedback
Yes.
as well as take information to them. So, are there processes, are there ways in which these influencers can be or are being engaged?
Yes.
Okay.
So there are multiple organizations which are working at the grassroots level. UNICEF, they have a very direct plan to engage the community
Right.
in order to, ensure that they influence the larger community. Therefore, yes,
Right.
there are community messengers that are identified and
Right. And so there must be other grassroots NGOs who are being partnered with.
huge.
Right. So in that scenario, the role of NGOs becomes very critical.
Yes.
And something which is often overlooked.
Right, absolutely. So NGOs, if you see, they kind of provide four kinds of support in India's health system. One is around the preventive health aspect,
Right.
which is around vaccines. The second is around promotive health. Promotive
Right.
health is also again around the immunization, nutrition, and all those kind of stuff. The third is curative, which means that they would organize camps for, tubectomy or, the cataract
Right.
operations and all of those. And the final one is rehabilitative, where, they would take care of the leprosy patients and
Right.
various other kinds of NGOs that work. Now, the preventive and the promotive group of NGOs that work, they are the ones that we target in
Right.
order for them to speak about immunization. There are multiple examples, I'll not take one name, but
Sure.
Seva is very strong,
Right.
working in Gujarat and other places. So there are many, many examples of NGOs who work. Mamta is one good example from Delhi,
Right.
which has great field presence in many places and work. West Bengal, Cine does a
Right.
great job. So there are many.
So when we have the government system, which is almost there till the village level with the FLWs, and we have a private sector also, why does the role of these NGOs become so important? Like, where exactly do they fit in?
The NGOs fit in from three aspects. One, they are very well connected with the community in terms of various other, because they don't focus on one work. They bring a composite package, and that package sort of they have a pulse of the community very well.
Right.
The second is, I will say from my own experience, that there is a huge trust factor that plays
Right.
between the community and the NGOs. There is a bonding that develops between these people, because the NGOs often end up hiring local people to work with
Right.
the community, and therefore there is a trust factor that is there. And the third aspect is that the NGOs are looked upon as not representing any sections, for example, the government or the private
Right.
sector or others. They have an independent voice and an independent counsel. So many times we have seen the NGOs actually being the only, kind of voice that is being trusted by the community, because they are seen upon as someone who is not promoting a program of the government, but, saying something of
Right.
their own understanding.
So this is an interesting role that NGOs fit in.
Oh, huge.
Because they're not everywhere, and I don't think there are NGOs which are big enough who are present across the country in every village. So they have their own pockets of influence, but they can negotiate or start conversations that the government or the private sector cannot do.
Absolutely.
So not just in public health, obviously NGOs work in different areas as well. But have there been cases or examples where there have been innovations that have been started by NGOs and have been adopted by either the government or the community in general?
Huge. If you see the Jamkhed one, which Dr. Arole and others ran, if you see the ASHA, origin of the ASHA, that has come from an NGO. There are many, many examples which are there where NGOs actually started some kind of a model. One of the challenges that NGOs have is their resources
Right.
and their capacity is small. So what they do is that they almost, if I can use that word, they pilot something and then probably hand it over to the government for the government to scale up.
Right.
Now, the other thing that the NGOs do is that NGOs have a very strong understanding of the system.
Right.
Now, NGOs having understanding of the system, they develop tools and innovations which can actually be adapted within the system very, very well. That's a difference between, I will say, an academic institution which might come in from outside or
Right.
Come and do a great innovation. But their understanding of the system would not be as strong as a local NGO. Therefore, a very strong partnership can develop between a very strong academic institution, which has, the very good brains and very
Right.
good resources to develop these kinds of tools. NGO can then actually sort of implement that. And then the government and other funders can bridge this, between the NGOs and the academic
Right.
institutions. After that, it is scaled up. For example, it's not done by an NGO, but I can give an example of something called an electronic vaccine intelligence network, based on which this CoWIN has been formed.
Right.
So when this event came, this was first thought about by a startup company in Bangalore.
Okay.
Called Logistibo. They had designed it, and then they sort of, approached and passed through a process which was called the innovation grant and all of that. So once they went through that, then what happened is that they did a small pilot with the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and with an organization called John Snow Incorporations.
Right.
That small pilot in one district of Western Uttar Pradesh was
Right.
so valuable and helpful that after that, they kind of escalated that in the government. And the government has now running that even application throughout the country, supported by UNDP. Therefore, these examples of small kinds of innovations scaling
Right.
up across the country is now available. So the only thing is that they need to be compatible to the system.
Right.
They need to be affordable because, obviously the price is an important issue.
And when NGOs or like any community organization, they partner with academic institutions, they also become an important catalyst in translating science information,
Absolutely.
right? So, and for any public health or any technical program to run, specifically on vaccines, because we are in the middle of, a lot of vaccine rollouts. How do you think NGOs are able to, or how do you think the cooperation between NGOs and, academic institutions work? How does the science translate to the community?
So there are many examples. Like, see, if you look at what the Indian Institute of Health Management and Research does, so they have large number of NGOs with whom they work. Now,
Right.
IHMR comes up with some brilliant ideas about
Right.
how to do the transformation. But that idea to be really practiced in the field, they depend upon the NGOs who really do it. Then, for example, the Public Health Foundation of India,
Right.
they did the same thing. So there are many, many examples of how this is to be done. Now, an idea comes in the shape of, a theoretical, I'll say a kind of a theory of change. Now, in order to do the theory of action,
Right.
there the NGO really is the driver of that action.
Right.
And when the NGO does it, because they also have limited resources, they do it in a manner that is scalable. Because without that, really nothing helps. So I will say that, in the whole process, in the theory of change, it is the academic institutions who bring about that thought process. Theory of action driven by NGOs works very
Right.
well.
And one of the questions people usually have is that one of the conspiracy theories against vaccine is that there is a group of people who wants to vaccinate people forcefully, and they have this some kind of interest in vaccinating people.
Right. So, there is one thing about vaccines that needs to be very, very clear.
Right.
That it is, no vaccine is mandatory.
Right.
The second is that, the larger the number of people get vaccinated,
Right.
the better protection it provides,
Yeah.
either in the form of herd immunity or in terms of the self-protection. And the third is that, there is no vaccine which is 100% safe.
Sure.
So for every vaccine, there will be a background rate of the adverse event. Now that the regulatory agencies are supposed to look at regularly, even after they are approved,
Right.
to see whether, what is the background rate of the adverse
Right.
events happening. Now, one cannot force vaccination, but one can definitely advocate for vaccination. So the advocacy sometimes becomes a very strong advocacy. There are, kind of some rulings that are given that, if you do not vaccinate your child, they kind of face issues around admission in schools and all of that. Does not happen in India. I want to be very clear. But in many countries in the world, it does happen. In India, all vaccines are voluntary, but there is a very strong advocacy and information education campaign to the community about the benefits of vaccine and about, how the children really are protected from vaccines. So, yes.
Right. Why do you think, and it's not that big a problem in India, it's more of a problem in the West, specifically the US. Why do you think some people, or why do you think even celebrities become, in the group of anti-vaxxers? What happens that they choose not to believe in science when they have access to all information?
Two things happen. One, obviously, is misinformation. That there is a very, structured misinformation that happens.
Right.
For example, today fake news is no more a joke. It is almost an industry. There, similarly, for misinformation around vaccines, there is a very concerted group which keeps on working on spreading the misinformation. Why they do that? There are multiple reasons. There are religious beliefs. There are beliefs around, the body's, their understanding of, the wrong understanding, I'll say, of science of the body and all of that. But then there is one important factor that one needs to keep in mind is about the complacency.
Right.
There is a catch-22 situation here. For example, today we don't see polio. Now, one might generally think that if there is no polio, why do I need to go and give my child a drop? Because the disease has gone for the last 10 years. That's where complacency sets in.
Right.
That is what we saw in Florida, in US, and about 2 decades back in UK on measles.
Right.
That the measles had disappeared and, people did not vaccinate for measles. Measles returned.
Right.
So this message has to really go that there is no complacency unless a disease is eradicated, for example, smallpox.
Right. You think the government can actually, or like, it's not just because now news is not local anymore. It travels everywhere.
Absolutely.
So do you think there needs to be a concerted effort in terms of improving the science communication that the scientific community does?
Yes. There's always room for improvement. The most important thing is that we need to really find people who the community trust. For example, for polio, somehow we had a very strong brand ambassador in Mr. Bachchan.
Right.
Now, there are three kinds of, messengers of products like vaccines. One, individuals who have a trust for Sachin Tendulkar, Amitabh Bachchan, but they can do only up to a certain limit because they are not scientists. People understand that they are speaking as brand ambassadors of vaccines and science. Then there are, academic institutions. For example, if I see AIIMS, everyone understands All India Institute of Medical Sciences, CMC Vellore. These are premier institutions. If these institutions come together and come out with a declaration saying that, certain vaccines are good or things like that, then people have a trust that these institutions themselves have a reputation. But the third most important thing is around the physician bodies. That is, if the Indian Medical Association, the Indian Academy of Pediatricians, they come out with a statement, it comes out on behalf of a professional body which you can trust. But again, I will say that the community really needs to hear from the community. The community, has their own representatives whom they trust and whom they believe. It may not always be the politician. It may be a completely different person who the community trusts. Those kinds of people really need to come out and speak about vaccines. But they need to have some credibility of understanding science and therefore, link that.
I think that's where the challenge lies because science has advanced far enough that it's sort of out of touch with the layperson.
Exactly.
So they cannot consume it and translate it for themselves. If it were 100 years ago, it would have been easier, especially for medicine.
But see, that is where the role of media comes.
Right.
In the Western world, the media plays a fantastic role. For example, if you see the New York Times, if you see the Economist, they have constantly come out with fantastic information
Right.
on the COVID-19 vaccine. One of the big challenges we are now facing with social media, but social media is also understanding about their responsible behavior,
Right.
WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and everywhere. So these are the real kind of change
Right.
agents.
Right.
So we really need to ensure that they are also kind of taught science so that they can also talk about science.
Is there any active cooperation that is being going on
huge.
between the scientific bodies and
Yes.
these platforms?
Facebook, Google, WhatsApp is also part of the Facebook, Instagram, part of Facebook. So all of them have now tied up very well in order to spread the message of science. And more importantly, also to stop the, spread of any misinformation,
Right.
which is very, very important. The other important thing is that the science needs to be told in a language that people understand.
Right.
That's the most important thing, because people don't understand jargons. People don't understand, long or big words about science. They need to be told stories. They
Right.
need to be told in their own words, common questions. For example, a fake news
Right.
is only important because of the questions it generates. So we must not address the fake news, but we must address the questions.
Right.
So any fake news can give rise to 5 questions. Some coming from very non-scientific mind to some coming from very scientific minds who
Right.
find some merit in the fake news and have some questions.
Right.
So we need to answer those questions rather than just address the fake news.
Since this type of information working with these platforms, social media giants, would take like global cooperation, right? So are there active bodies who
Yes.
are collaborating with these?
All this, World Health Organization, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the UN bodies, UNICEF, they have
Right.
all partnerships and agreements with these bodies in order to take these kind of scientific dialogue forward. More and more, we are understanding that without scientific dialogue, we are really going to be in a big problem. So,
Right.
yes,
Okay. Dr. Ghosh, thank you so much for doing this.
pleasure.
It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.